All right, let's talk about something we hear all the time, entrepreneurial ecosystems. Those amazing local hotspots that seem to churn out the next big thing. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. The super smart academic research on this stuff. It often just doesn't connect with the policymakers who are actually on the ground trying to make these ecosystems happen. Today, we're going to break down how we can fix that. You gotta love this quote from the paper we're looking at. It just perfectly nails the frustration, right? Researchers spend years, and I mean years, on these incredibly complex theories. And when they finally present them, the policymaker is just sitting there thinking, okay, but what do I do with this? It's a classic case of theory versus reality. So here's how we're going to tackle this. First, we'll look at the original promise of ecosystems. Then we'll get into why this gap between research and practice has gotten so wide. After that, we'll unpack a new playbook to bring them back together, and we'll finish up with a toolkit you can actually use.
So let's rewind a bit. What's so cool about the whole entrepreneurial ecosystem idea is where it came from. It wasn't dreamed up in some university library. Nope, it was born right out in the real world, designed to be a practical tool from the get-go.
And man, did this idea take off. Back in 2010, it's pitched as this really practical tool for policymakers. Just 3 years later, the World Economic Forum is all over it. And why? Because it just made sense. It was intuitive. It gave people on the ground a clear way to think about building a vibrant startup scene that went way beyond just throwing money at the problem. And that's the key word right there, holistic. An ecosystem isn't just about venture capital. It's about everything. It's the great universities, the solid infrastructure, the tech talent, and even that supportive culture where people can connect and share ideas. This bigger picture gave policymakers a much richer, more powerful toolkit to play with.
The idea was a smash hit, but then things got complicated. As researchers really started to dig in and theorize, the gap between the academic world and the practical world started to get wider and wider.
And this is the real paradox, isn't it? You've got academics over here polishing their frameworks and arguing over definitions. Meanwhile, policymakers are out there in the real world making decisions every single day, allocating budgets, launching programs. The actual policies started moving faster than the research that was supposed to be guiding them. They were basically flying blind. And this slide really shows you that core tension. On the left, you have academic rigor, which is all about getting the theory perfect, even if it adds more complexity. But on the right, you have the practitioner, who needs clear, simple answers. They're asking, what do I do on Monday? How do I explain this to my boss and justify my budget? The two sides were just pulling in totally different directions. So what made the research so tough to actually apply? Well, a few things. For starters, what even is an ecosystem's boundary? Is it a city, a whole region? It's kind of fuzzy. And how do you measure if one is better than another? But the biggest problem was the data. Researchers often had to use data that was easy to get, not the data that told the whole story. The data might show you 100 new businesses were registered, but it completely misses the 5 game-changing conversations in a coffee shop that actually made it all happen. Okay, so that's the problem. It's a pretty big one. But the paper we're digging into doesn't just point fingers. It actually offers a solution. It's a new playbook designed to get researchers and policymakers speaking the same language again. The secret is to start thinking like a policymaker. You see, policy isn't just one big thing. It unfolds in stages. First up is the design stage. This is where you're dreaming up the ideas. Then you've got implementation, the messy, real-world part of actually doing it. And finally, monitoring and evaluation, where you ask, hey, did that thing we did actually work? The idea is that research can be super helpful at every single one of these stages.
Now this grid, this is where the magic happens. It's so simple, but it's brilliant. It forces researchers to ask the questions that policymakers are actually asking. So instead of a super abstract question, a researcher can now ask something specific, like, okay, for the policy design phase, what are the exact boundaries we should be thinking about? Or for the evaluation phase, how are we going to define and measure success in a way the government can understand? It totally changes the game. It turns research from a theoretical exercise into a real problem-solving tool.
So, when the authors of this paper showed this framework to a group of policymakers, they asked a really simple question. What do you need help with, like, right now? And the answers they got were crystal clear, pointing to 3 top priorities.
So here they are. First, they need help figuring out the boundaries. How do you get a city, a region, and a national government to all play nicely together? Second, connectedness. How do we make the networks inside our own ecosystem stronger, and how do we build bridges to other ecosystems? And third, measurement. They said, look, we need real-world metrics. Give us things like the cost per job created or the new tax revenue generated. We need that stuff to prove our work is valuable and to justify our budgets.
All right, this is all great, but how do we actually make it happen? Well, the paper turns this whole framework into a practical toolkit that anyone, and yeah, that includes you, can use to start bridging this gap and make a real difference. I just love this line from the paper. It's such a powerful call to action. It's saying the goal isn't just to do research that sounds smart in a journal. The goal is to create knowledge that has a real, tangible, and yes, dramatic impact on the world around us.
So here's your toolkit. 3 simple things. 1. Use this as a diagnostic tool. Seriously, take this framework to a local policymaker and to start a conversation. 2. Use it as a dialogue tool. Get researchers, entrepreneurs, and investors all in the same room. And 3. Use it as a design tool. Think about your own work, whatever you do, and ask yourself how it could help answer some of these real-world policy questions.
And that really brings us to the final thought here. This isn't just some abstract problem for academics. It affects every single one of us who lives in a city or region that's trying to build a better future. So the question I want to leave you with is this. When you look at your own community, your own backyard, how can you help bridge that gap between great ideas and real, meaningful action?